The smell of the casserole was strange, too metallic, too sharp. My daughter, Lily, pushed the plate away, her frail fingers trembling. "Mom, it tastes funny." Within seconds, her face turned pale, her lips quivered, and her body went limp in the wheelchair. My heart stopped. Across the street, HOA President Karen stood by her porch, smiling. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. The food came from her. What kind of monster poisons a disabled child? If you're a parent, imagine watching your child's life slipping away because of your neighbor's jealousy. This isn't just a story, it's a nightmare that became our reality. Hey, everyone, before we dive in, tell me, which city are you watching from? Drop your city name in the comments below, backhand index pointing down. And if you love real, shocking stories that reveal the dark side of human nature, make sure to subscribe. Because today's story will leave you speechless. It started like any other morning in Maplewood Estates. Quiet lawns, trimmed hedges, smiling faces that hid judgment behind every wave. My daughter Lily was the light of my life. Born with a rare muscular condition, she couldn't walk on her own, but her laughter could light up the entire neighborhood. Everyone adored her, except one person, Karen. Karen, the self-appointed ruler of our homeowners association, hated anything or anyone that didn't fit her perfect image of the community. When Lily's wheelchair ramps ruined the symmetry of our porch, Karen filed a complaint. When Lily's therapy dog barked once during the night, she called animal control. But I never imagined that Karen's hatred would go this far. That one day, she'd walk up to my door offering homemade food for your sweet daughter, laced with something deadly. And that was just the beginning. It was a crisp Sunday morning in Maplewood Estates, the kind of day when sunlight filters through the trees like golden ribbons and everything feels deceptively calm. I was in the kitchen making Lily's favorite, apple pancakes with cinnamon sprinkles, when I heard the doorbell ring. I glanced at the clock. 9:15 a.m. Too early for visitors. When I opened the door, there she was, Karen, dressed in her usual HOA uniform, royal blue shirt, golden collar trim, and black pants. She stood there holding a casserole dish wrapped in silver foil. Her smile was as bright as the sun, but her eyes were cold and hollow, like she was wearing kindness as a mask. "Good morning, dear," she said, her voice drenched in fake sweetness. "I thought I'd bring something special for little Lily. It's my famous chicken casserole. Made it myself." I blinked, confused. "Oh, that's kind of you, Karen. But you really didn't have to." "Oh, nonsense," she said, waving her hand dramatically. "After all, we're neighbors. I feel terrible about that little misunderstanding with the ramp situation. Consider this my peace offering." I hesitated. A peace offering? The last time she'd spoken to me, she'd threatened to fine us for violating HOA aesthetic guidelines because of the wheelchair ramp. And now, suddenly she was playing friendly neighbor? Something felt off. But before I could respond, Lily rolled in, her face lighting up. "Hi, Miss Karen," she said cheerfully. "That smells yummy." Karen's expression softened instantly, but it wasn't genuine, it was too quick, too rehearsed. She crouched down to Lily's level. "Oh, sweetheart, I made it just for you. You're such a brave little girl. You deserve something delicious." The words made my stomach twist. Still, I thanked her politely, took the dish, and watched as she waved goodbye and strutted back across the street. When I closed the door, I couldn't shake the unease. Something about her tone, her smile, the timing, it all felt calculated. But I pushed it aside. Maybe, just maybe, she was trying to make amends. A few hours later, Lily and I sat at the dining table. The casserole was warm, its aroma filling the house. I scooped a small portion for Lily, adding extra cheese the way she liked. She smiled, closed her eyes, and took her first bite. And then everything changed. Her fork clattered against the plate. Her face turned pale, her lips parted as if she was trying to breathe, but couldn't. "Mom," she whispered, "it tastes weird." My heart jumped. "Weird how, baby?" She shook her head weakly. "It's bitter." I rushed to her side, just as her hand trembled uncontrollably. Her eyes rolled slightly, her body went limp in the wheelchair. I froze, panic coursed through my veins. Lily? I shook her gently, then harder. Lily. No response. Only shallow, uneven breaths. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped it. My daughter. She's not breathing properly. Please, send an ambulance now. The operator's calm voice guided me through basic steps, but my mind was spiraling. I glanced at the casserole dish on the table. The smell now seemed stronger, metallic, wrong. Did she eat anything else? The operator asked. No, just food from a neighbor. All right, ma'am. Don't let anyone else eat it. Help is on the way. The sirens came fast, blue and red lights, painting the walls of our living room. 2 paramedics rushed in, assessing Lily while I stood frozen in the doorway. One checked her pulse, the other prepared oxygen. Pulse is weak, one shouted. Possible ingestion of toxins. The words hit me like a slap. Toxins. Poison. They lifted Lily carefully from her wheelchair and placed her on the stretcher. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, her small hand dangled limply by her side. My throat tightened. I'm coming with you, I said, my voice trembling. The paramedic nodded. Stay close, ma'am. We'll do everything we can. At the hospital, everything was a blur. White walls, beeping monitors, doctors rushing in and out. I sat outside the emergency room, clutching Lily's pink blanket against my chest. Every second felt like a lifetime. A doctor finally emerged, removing his gloves. She's stable now, he said gently, but she's been exposed to something toxic. We'll need to run more tests to identify what it was. Toxic. That word echoed in my head again. Doctor, I said, my voice cracking, could it be food poisoning? He hesitated. It's possible, but the symptoms suggest something stronger. Chemical, maybe intentional. Intentional. I stared at the floor, my mind flashing back to Karen's smile, her tone, her carefully chosen words. The casserole. The peace offering. My hands curled into fists. When I got home later that evening, the house felt different. Colder. The untouched portion of the casserole sat on the counter, covered with foil. I pulled on gloves, packed it into a Ziploc bag, and placed it in the fridge. Then I went outside. Across the street, Karen was watering her roses, humming softly to herself. When she saw me, she waved. How's Lily feeling? She called out sweetly. I stared at her, unable to speak. My instinct screamed that she knew exactly what she'd done. She's in the hospital, I said flatly. Karen's hand froze midair. Oh dear. Was it something she ate? The way she said it, so casual, so knowing, made my skin crawl. I forced a tight smile. We're still figuring that out. Well, she said, setting the water inkin down, I do hope she recovers soon. Such a fragile little thing, her words twisted like a knife. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching Karen's house. The porch light flicked on and off at odd intervals. At one point, I saw her walk to her backyard with a large garbage bag. She looked around, then tossed something into her bin. My heart pounded. The next morning, I called Officer Daniels, a local cop who'd helped with HOA disputes before. I think my neighbor tried to poison my daughter. I said, my voice trembling. There was a pause on the line. That's a serious accusation, ma'am. Do you have any proof? I have the food she gave us. My daughter ended up in the hospital right after eating it. All right, he said finally. Don't touch it anymore. I'll come by to collect it. When the police arrived, they took the casserole for testing. Karen stood across the street, watching, pretending to water her plants again. But I saw the flicker of panic in her eyes when they placed the evidence in a sealed bag. I knew then she wasn't just cruel. She was dangerous. As the police car drove away, I whispered under my breath, "You tried to hurt my child, Karen, but you have no idea who you're dealing with." I turned back toward the house, my mind already racing with what I'd do next. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, the world felt heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on my chest. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily's pale face, her body trembling in that wheelchair, the spoon clattering from her small hand. The hospital had kept her overnight for observation, and I was supposed to rest, but how could I? The thought that someone had tried to kill my child, someone who lived across the street, burned like acid inside me. At 8 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Officer Daniels. "Mrs. Miller, we got the preliminary report from a lab," he said. His tone was serious, colder than before. The casserole contained traces of ethylene glycol. I froze. What is that?" "It's a chemical compound. Commonly found in antifreeze," he explained. "Highly toxic when ingested. Even a few spoonfuls could be fatal." My breath caught. Antifreeze. She'd poisoned my little girl with antifreeze. Daniels continued, "We've sent the sample for confirmatory testing. In the meantime, we'll need to question your neighbor, Karen Walsh. Do you recall exactly when she delivered the food?" I did. I remembered every detail. The fake smile, the carefully wrapped casserole, the rehearsed apology. "She brought it around 9:15 Sunday morning. I said it was a peace offering." There was silence on the line for a moment. Then Daniels said, quietly, "I'll handle this. Just stay calm." But calm was impossible. That afternoon, a patrol car pulled up in front of Karen's house. From my window, I watched as Daniels and another officer approached her door. She greeted them like they were guests at a garden party, laughing lightly, her golden hair perfectly brushed, her uniform spotless. They talked for nearly 30 minutes. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the gestures, Karen's hand on her chest in mock shock, her exaggerated nods, the occasional tear she dabbed away with a tissue. Finally, the officers left. Karen stood at her door for a moment, watching them drive off, and then her expression changed completely. The fake sorrow melted away. Her lips curved into a cold, satisfied smirk. She turned her head, and for just a second, our eyes met through the glass. That smirk widened. I stepped back from the window, my pulse racing. She knew I was watching. When I visited Lily that evening, she was awake, sitting up in bed with a blanket tucked around her. Her little face still looked tired, but she managed a weak smile. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly, brushing her hair back. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she murmured. "The doctor gave me medicine that tastes like bubblegum." I forced a smile, but inside I was breaking. "Mom," she said suddenly, looking down at her hands, "Miss Karen said she made that food special for me. Why did it make me sick?" Her voice cracked on the word sick. My throat tightened. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want her to lose faith in people, in kindness, in trust, all the things children should still believe in. So I lied. "Maybe Miss Karen made a mistake. Honey, sometimes food can spoil." But Lily's eyes told me she didn't believe that. She was young, but not naive. Before I left, the nurse told me the doctors expected a full recovery. Physically, at least. But trauma leaves deeper scars, the kind you can't see on a scan. Back home, I found an envelope on my porch. No stamp, no name, just one word written in capital letters. Enough. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a printed note: "You people don't belong here. Stop pretending your crippled daughter is special. Some of us care about this neighborhood's image. Take this as a warning." My heart dropped. It wasn't just about hate, it was personal. Someone, maybe more than one person, wanted us gone. I called Daniels immediately. He arrived within 15 minutes, read the note carefully, and exhaled sharply. "This is harassment and likely tied to your neighbor," he said. "But without fingerprints or direct evidence, it's hard to pin it on her." "So, what do I do?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Wait until she tries again?" He met my eyes. "No, ma'am. I'll assign a patrol to keep an eye on your street. And I'd suggest installing cameras front and back." That night, I did exactly that. Over the next few days, the neighborhood started buzzing. People whispered when I walked by. Mrs. Higgins from next door avoided eye contact. A few others offered awkward smiles, but I could feel the tension. Karen must have started her campaign of lies. And sure enough, at the next HOA meeting, it exploded. I went, even though my gut told me not to. The meeting was held in the community hall, the same one where Karen always stood at the front, controlling every agenda. When I walked in, the chatter quieted instantly. "Ah, Mrs. Miller," Karen said, her smile sharp as glass. Glad you could join us. I was just addressing some concerns. Concerns? I asked. She tilted her head dramatically. Well, there have been rumors. Someone claimed you accused me of trying to poison your child. Murmurs spread across the room. I clenched my fists. Those aren't rumors. That's what happened. Her eyes widened in mock offense. Oh, please. The police came because you can't handle your own cooking. And now you're trying to destroy my reputation? You gave my daughter food laced with antifreeze. I shouted, my voice echoing. She almost died. Gasps filled the room. But Karen just laughed. Antifreeze? Really? Maybe you should stop watching so many crime shows. My hands trembled, but I didn't back down. The lab confirmed it. They're investigating. Her smile faltered for a split second. Just a flicker, but I saw it. Before she could respond, Daniels walked into the hall. The entire room turned toward him. Miss Walsh, he said firmly, I need to speak with you outside. Karen froze. For the first time, her confidence cracked. Is this really necessary, officer? Yes, it is. He escorted her out, leaving the room in stunned silence. Hours later, I got a call. Daniels sounded tired. We questioned her again. She denies everything, of course. Says she bought the casserole pre-made from a deli downtown. We're checking the security cameras there. Do you believe her? A pause. No, but believing isn't proof. We need something concrete. That night, as I reviewed my newly installed camera footage, I noticed something strange. Around 2:17 a.m., a figure appeared near my mailbox, wearing a hoodie, moving quietly. They slipped another envelope through the slot and hurried off toward Karen's house. My hands shook as I played it back in slow motion. The walk, the height, the slight limp in the left leg. It was Karen. I called Daniels again, sent him the footage. This changes things, he said. We can get a warrant now. The next morning, police cars surrounded Karen's house. Neighbors peeked through curtains as officers searched her property. I watched from my porch, heart pounding. After an hour, Daniels approached me. His expression was grim but determined. We found several empty antifreeze bottles in her garage, hidden behind cleaning supplies. My knees nearly gave out. So it's over? Not yet, he said. We'll need lab confirmation. But it's a start. Across the street, Karen stood in handcuffs, shouting about harassment and false accusations. Her perfect facade had finally cracked, revealing the monster beneath. And as they put her in the car, she turned her head and glared at me. You'll regret this, she hissed. You have no idea what's coming. But for the first time in days, I felt something close to relief. Because I did know what was coming. Justice. The morning after Karen's arrest, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. People stood on porches, whispering, pretending to water their lawns while secretly watching the police cars outside her house. For once, the all-powerful HOA, Queen, had fallen, and I thought maybe this nightmare was finally ending. But I was wrong. So wrong. By noon, the phone rang. It was Officer Daniels. His tone was strange, flat, cautious. Mrs. Miller, we've run into a complication, he said. My stomach tightened. What kind of complication? The antifreeze samples we seized from Karen's garage, they've gone missing from the evidence locker. I blinked. Missing? How can that happen? That's what we're trying to figure out, he replied. The surveillance footage from the evidence room has also been erased. Someone with access deleted the files. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. So, what does that mean for the case? It means, he said quietly, we can't hold her without hard proof. She's being released. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Released? Daniels, she tried to kill my daughter. I know, he said, his voice heavy, but the system needs evidence. I'll keep an eye on her, but please be careful. I ended the call and stared at the floor, disbelief washing over me. The justice I'd clung to like a lifeline had vanished overnight, buried under bureaucracy and corruption. Karen was coming home. That evening, her car pulled up to her driveway. She stepped out like nothing had happened, her chin held high, her golden HOA uniform freshly ironed. Neighbors who had turned against her earlier now smiled sheepishly, pretending nothing had changed. I stood on my porch, my fists clenched. She looked up and met my gaze, that same cruel smirk returning to her lips. Then she mouthed 2 words across the street. Nice try. My blood boiled. That night, I checked the footage from my security cameras again. Around 3 a.m., I saw movement. Someone creeping near my trash bins. The figure bent down, slipped something inside, and disappeared into the darkness. The next morning, when I opened the bin, my heart dropped. Inside was a dead squirrel, and next to it, a plastic container labeled Lily's lunch. She was sending me a message. The police came again, but there wasn't much they could do. Daniels seemed frustrated, like his hands were tied. She's taunting you, he said, shaking his head. But unless she threatens you directly, the department won't issue another warrant. And given what happened with the missing evidence, he trailed off. I could tell he didn't want to say what we were both thinking. Someone on the inside was protecting her. A few days later, I decided to confront the HOA directly. I wanted to expose Karen's history of abuse, her threats, her obsession with control. I gathered every letter she'd ever sent, every fine she'd issued, every audio clip of her yelling during board meetings. When I walked into the HOA office, I was met by the vice president, Tom Reynolds, a tall, middle-aged man who always seemed to linger in Karen's shadow. Mrs. Miller, he said stiffly, adjusting his glasses. I heard about the misunderstanding with Karen. Terrible thing. But you have to understand, we don't involve ourselves in personal disputes. Personal? I snapped. She poisoned my child. He didn't even flinch. That's a police matter, not an HOA concern. Something about his calmness felt rehearsed, like he'd been expecting me. Funny, I said, narrowing my eyes. You're defending her pretty confidently, almost like you already know how this will play out. His lips curved slightly. Let's just say, Karen has friends in important places, and it would be best for everyone if you stop making waves. The way he said it, so quietly, so certain, made my stomach turn. You're protecting her, I whispered. He smiled faintly. Protecting the neighborhood, Mrs. Miller. We can't have scandal here. Imagine what it would do to property values. That's when I realized it wasn't just Karen, it was the whole HOA board. They all had something to lose if she went down. I walked out shaking, a new kind of anger burning in my chest. They thought I'd give up. They thought they could silence me with their threats and smiles. They were wrong. That night, I sat by Lily's bedside, watching her sleep. Her breathing was steady now, her color had returned. But the fear still lingered in her small body. Every time a car drove by outside, she flinched. Every time the doorbell rang, she froze. I brushed her hair, gently. You're safe now, baby, I whispered. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. When I went downstairs, I noticed something odd on the porch, a small note taped to the door. You can't protect her forever. No signature. No handwriting I recognized, but deep down I knew. Karen. The next day, Daniels called again. You were right, he said grimly. There's someone inside the department leaking information. We traced the deleted evidence access to an officer named Sergeant Cole. He's connected to Karen through the HOA. Her husband used to be his supervisor. I clenched the phone tighter. So that's how she's getting away with everything. Pretty much. But listen, Cole's under internal review. If we can get proof he tampered with evidence, we can reopen the case. How do we do that? We need something he can't explain away. A recording, a witness, anything that ties him to her. That night, I made a decision. If the police couldn't protect us, I'd protect my daughter myself. I set up an additional camera facing Karen's driveway. I bought a small voice recorder and hid it in Lily's old toy stroller, which sat near the sidewalk. I didn't care if it was risky, I needed proof. 2 nights later, it happened. At around midnight, I heard footsteps outside. I checked the monitor and saw Karen standing near the mailbox, whispering to someone. It was a man, tall, in a police jacket. Sergeant Cole. I turned the volume up. The recorder caught fragments. Karen's voice, low and bitter. I told you to get rid of everything. Cole's reply, I did. But Daniels is sniffing around. He's not going to drop it. Then Karen again, handle him. Or I'll handle you. My blood ran cold. The next morning, I sent the audio file to Daniels anonymously along with the footage. Within hours, everything changed. By evening, Internal Affairs had launched a full investigation. Cole was suspended pending inquiry, and Karen's home was searched again, this time thoroughly. What they found shattered the entire HOA's perfect image. Hidden behind Karen's shed was a small storage box filled with vials, chemicals, and dozens of printed notes targeting families she didn't approve of. Some of the notes were identical to the ones I'd received. The police sealed off her house. Neighbors stood outside, stunned. The woman they'd once admired, the guardian of Maplewood's order, was now being led away in handcuffs again, screaming that it was all a setup. But this time, there was no smirk. No confidence. Just rage. As the police car pulled out of the driveway, I stood at the window, holding Lily's hand. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Mom," she whispered, "is the bad lady gone now?" I swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, she's gone." But deep inside, I wasn't sure. Because monsters like Karen don't just disappear, they leave shadows behind. And as I glanced across the street one last time, I noticed something chilling. On her porch, under the flower pot, was a small, folded note, half buried but still visible in the wind. I walked over slowly, heart pounding, and picked it up. The paper read, "You think this ends with me?" I froze, staring at the words, feeling the cold realization wash over me. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The following days blurred together. Even with Karen in custody, the neighborhood didn't feel safer, just quieter in that eerie way a forest feels before a storm. The manicured lawns, the freshly painted fences, the perfectly aligned mailboxes. It all looked the same, but something dark was rotting beneath the surface. At first, I thought it was over. Officer Daniels called to tell me Karen was officially being charged with attempted homicide, evidence tampering, and harassment. But there was hesitation in his voice when he said, "Don't celebrate yet. There's more going on here than we thought." "What do you mean?" I asked, clutching the phone tighter. She wasn't acting alone. The deeper we dig into the HOA's records, the uglier it gets. That one sentence sent a shiver through me. I thought this was about one evil woman's hatred. I didn't realize it was the tip of something much larger and much colder. A week later, Daniels came by the house, his face drawn and tired. He sat at my kitchen table, flipping through a folder of documents stamped confidential. "Mrs. Miller," he began, "how much do you know about the HOA's finances?" "Finances?" I repeated, confused. "What does that have to do with?" "Everything," he interrupted. Karen wasn't just a power-hungry neighbor. She was covering up years of embezzlement, money missing from neighborhood maintenance budgets, fraudulent fines against families she didn't like, and property sale kickbacks. She had help from other board members, people who wanted to keep their own secrets buried. He pushed a few papers toward me. Bank statements, payment logs, signatures. And one name jumped out like a slap across the face. Tom Reynolds, the same vice president who told me to stop making waves. She laundered HOA funds through Tom's construction company, Daniels continued. That money was supposed to fix playgrounds, repair roads, fund the neighborhood events. Instead, they used it to remodel their homes and buy silence from anyone who questioned it. I sat back, stunned. So, when I confronted her, she was scared I'd expose everything? Exactly. The poisoning wasn't just hate, it was desperation. You were becoming a problem. She wanted to send a message. My stomach churned. And the others? He sighed. We're still identifying them. But someone's been leaking our investigation details to the HOA board. Every time we make a move, they already know about it. That night, I stared out the window, watching as neighborhood lights flickered on one by one. Everything looked so normal, kids riding bikes, families grilling dinner. But the illusion was cracked now. I began to notice small things. 2 cars parked outside my house longer than usual, HOA members whispering whenever I walked by, envelopes left on my doorstep with no sender. Each one had the same message written in neat, typewritten letters. You should have kept quiet. The fear that had once been sharp was now constant. A low hum beneath, everything I did, but alongside it, another emotion had started to grow: anger. If they thought I would back down now, they didn't know who they were dealing with. 3 nights later, Daniels called again. His voice was tense. "Mrs. Miller, I need you to stay home tonight. We're executing a search warrant on Tom Reynolds' office. If we're right, this could tie the entire HOA board to the corruption case. Will Karen be there?" I asked. "She's still in holding. But Tom, he's been nervous. We've been monitoring his calls. He's been trying to reach someone on a private line. Someone named JW. Who's that? We don't know yet. But my gut says that's the real person pulling the strings." Around midnight, the sound of sirens jolted me awake. I ran to the window and saw flashing blue lights reflecting off the wet asphalt. Police cars surrounded Tom's construction office at the edge of the neighborhood. I stepped outside, just as Daniels approached, his face pale. "We found the missing evidence," he said quietly. "The antifreeze bottles, the deleted files, everything. It was all stored in Tom's office." "So that's it then?" I whispered. "You have them." He hesitated. "Not exactly. Tom's dead." The words hit like a physical blow. Dead. Gunshot wound. Self-inflicted, according to the scene. But something feels off. There's no gunpowder residue on his hands. Someone staged it. I felt my knees weaken. "Then that means," "Yeah," Daniel said grimly. "Whoever JW is, they're cleaning house." The next day, the HOA meeting was canceled. The website went down. Board members stopped answering calls. It was like the entire organization had vanished overnight. But I wasn't done. I went through old HOA newsletters, payment receipts, even Lily's therapy ramp permit papers, anything with a signature. And that's when I found it. A single sheet of approval for the Community Aesthetic Fund, signed not by Karen or Tom, but by Jonathan Wexler, the HOA's founding president. J.W. He wasn't just another member. He was the founder. A retired businessman who lived in the mansion on the hill at the end of the street, the one with the gated driveway and the black SUV, always parked out front. Karen had been his puppet. That evening I drove up the hill. The air felt colder there, heavier. Wexler's house loomed like a fortress, lights dim behind tall windows. I parked across the street and sat there, my heart hammering. I knew it was dangerous, but I couldn't turn back now. I needed answers. When the gates opened suddenly, I almost jumped. A car rolled out, a sleek black SUV. As it passed, I caught a glimpse of the driver, a man in his 60s, sharp suit, silver hair slicked back. His face was calm. Too calm. He didn't notice me, or maybe he did and didn't care. As the car disappeared down the street, I slipped through the gate before it closed and walked up to the house. Every step felt heavier. The front door was slightly open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cologne and something metallic. I stepped inside, my phone light trembling in my hand. Papers were scattered across the floor. HOA documents, bank statements, contracts. And right there on the desk was a folder labeled Operation Clean Street. My heart dropped as I opened it. Inside were photos of families from our neighborhood, those who'd been fined, harassed, or mysteriously moved away. Notes scrawled beside each one. "Too noisy, devalues property, removed quietly." Then I saw mine. Miller family, problem mother, disabled child, target through inspection fines or legal pressure. I felt sick. Before I could process it, I heard the sound of tires on gravel outside. My pulse spiked. I ducked behind the curtain just as headlights swept across the room. The SUV had returned. Wexler stepped out, talking on the phone. His voice carried through the open window. "Yes, it's handled," he said calmly. "Reynolds took the fall. Karen will take the rest when she breaks. We'll rebrand the HOA under new leadership. No one will trace it back to me." My blood ran cold. I fumbled for my phone, hit record. My hands trembled as I captured his every word. Then a sudden creak behind me, floorboards. He turned. Our eyes met. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice calm but deadly. "You really should learn when to stop digging." I bolted out the back door, sprinting through the garden as he shouted behind me. My shoes slipped on the wet grass, but I didn't stop. I could hear his footsteps closing in, then the sharp bark of a dog from somewhere nearby. I reached my car, slammed the door shut, and peeled off down the hill. My chest was on fire, but the phone in my hand was still recording. When I finally stopped at a gas station miles away, I sent the audio straight to Daniels. Within an hour, he called back breathless. "We've got him. Stay put, Mrs. Miller. This recording changes everything." The next morning, I woke up to the sound of news helicopters over Maplewood. Local HOA president arrested in corruption and murder for hire scandal, the anchors said. Karen's crimes had been part of a bigger operation, Wexler's way of controlling property values and silencing dissent. The poison, the harassment, the fear, all of it orchestrated from the top. And as I looked out my window, watching the police swarm his mansion, I felt the first real sense of peace in months. But deep down, I knew peace was fragile. Because evil like that doesn't vanish. It hides, waits, and watches. And sometimes it lives right across the street. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras flashed like lightning, and the buzz of whispers drowned out the faint hum of the air conditioner. The case of the Maplewood HOA scandal had become national news, a twisted story of corruption, greed, and a mother's desperate fight for justice. I sat beside Officer Daniels in the front row, hands trembling as I clutched Lily's tiny hand. She sat quietly in her wheelchair, her hair braided neatly, a pink ribbon tied at the end. It had been months since the poisoning, and though she smiled more now, the fear in her eyes hadn't completely faded. At the defense table sat Jonathan Wexler, the man who had built this neighborhood like his personal empire. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his suit flawless, his face calm, almost smug. To his right sat his new attorney, a woman with sharp features and a sharper tongue, whispering strategy between every sentence. And beside them, in a separate chair under witness custody, was Karen Walsh. Her once proud HOA uniform was gone, replaced by a beige prison jumpsuit. But even without the fancy clothes or her painted smile, she still carried that same air of superiority, like she couldn't quite believe she'd been brought down to this level. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Court is now in session. The state versus Jonathan Wexler. The prosecution began with cold precision. Photos of the antifreeze bottles, bank transfers, hidden files, and recordings I had captured filled the screens. When the tape of Wexler's voice played, Reynolds took the fall. Karen will take the rest when she breaks. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Wexler sat there, stone-faced, only twitching slightly when his own words boomed through the speakers. Then the prosecutor turned toward me. "Mrs. Miller, please take the stand." I stood, my knees trembling as I walked to the witness box. The oath felt heavy, like the weight of every sleepless night rested on those few words. When I began to speak, my voice cracked. My daughter was poisoned by food given to her by Karen Walsh. We trusted her. She was our neighbor. The prosecutor nodded gently. "Can you tell the court what happened that day?" I told them everything: the casserole, Lily's sudden collapse, Karen's fake concern, the missing evidence, the note that said, "You people don't belong here." I watched the jurors' faces harden with anger. Then came the part that broke me. When I found out it was antifreeze, I whispered. I realized this wasn't just hatred. It was a message. They wanted to remind us we didn't belong. But I wasn't going to let my daughter's suffering be another HOA incident swept under the rug. Tears blurred my vision, but I continued. I fought because no mother should ever have to see their child fight for her life because of someone else's cruelty. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Even Wexler didn't look so smug anymore. Then the defense rose. "Mrs. Miller," the lawyer began, her voice cutting through the silence. "Isn't it true that you have a personal vendetta against the HOA? That you were fined multiple times before this incident?" "Yes," I said firmly. "For things like having a wheelchair ramp and a therapy dog. Do you call that justice?" The lawyer smirked. "And you claim Mrs. Walsh deliberately poisoned your daughter. Yet the casserole contained no fingerprints other than yours, correct?" My chest tightened. Because she wore gloves. So you believe, the lawyer pressed, but you have no proof. I stared her down. I have something better, a child who almost died. The audience murmured, the judge banged the gavel for order, and the lawyer stepped back, lips tight. When Karen was called to testify, the tension in the room thickened. She looked nervous now, her confidence cracking under the fluorescent lights. Mrs. Walsh, the prosecutor began, you were a key figure in this HOA. Did Jonathan Wexler ever instruct you to target specific residents? Karen hesitated. I don't remember. Perhaps this will refresh your memory. The prosecutor held up one of Wexler's letters bearing both their signatures. Operation Clean Street. You signed off on every action, including one labeled Miller family. Karen's lip trembled. He said it was about property standards, not poisoning a child, the prosecutor snapped. Karen's eyes darted toward Wexler, who sat perfectly still. For a brief second, fear flickered across her face. Then she broke. It was him, she shouted, pointing at Wexler. He told me to do it. He said the Millers were bad for the neighborhood, that we needed to send a message. The room exploded with gasps. The judge pounded his gavel for silence. Wexler leaned forward, his voice icy. Liar. Karen's composure shattered completely. You think I wanted to go to jail for you? You made me do everything. The fines, the threats, even the food. Enough, the judge thundered. But it was too late. The damage was done. Over the next few hours, the prosecution tore through Wexler's empire, revealing money trails, falsified HOA documents, and emails coordinating neighborhood cleansing initiatives. One by one, his allies were named. Some were even in the courtroom. And then came the final witness, Lily. I tried to protest, but the prosecutor assured me she wouldn't be pressured. They just wanted the jury to see the face of what this man had tried to destroy. When Lily was wheeled to the stand, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. She clutched her stuffed rabbit, the one she'd had in the hospital, and when the prosecutor knelt beside her, she whispered softly into the microphone. Miss Karen said I was brave. She gave me food and said it would make me stronger. But it made me sick. I don't like her anymore. The simplicity of her words pierced deeper than any evidence ever could. Even the judge's eyes softened. Wexler, for the first time, looked away. After days of arguments and testimony, the jury finally reached a verdict. When the foreman stood, the silence was absolute. We, the jury, find the defendant, Jonathan Wexler, guilty on all counts. Cheers erupted from the courtroom. Tears flowed freely, and I felt Lily squeeze my hand, whispering, "We won, Mommy." Karen, who had taken a plea deal for testifying, buried her face in her hands as Wexler was led away. His expression never changed, but as he passed me, he paused. "You think this ends here?" he muttered under his breath. "You don't know what you've started." The guards pushed him forward, and the heavy doors closed behind him with a final echoing clang. Outside the courthouse, the world felt different. The sky looked bluer, the air lighter. Reporters crowded around, flashing cameras and shouting questions, but I barely heard them. All I could see was Lily smiling up at me, sunlight catching the ribbon in her hair. "Can we go home now?" she asked softly. I knelt beside her, tears in my eyes. "Yes, baby, we can finally go home." But as we drove back through Maplewood, past the for sale signs and the empty HOA office, I couldn't shake one haunting thought. If Wexler's words were true, then somewhere out there, pieces of his empire still remained. And some battles aren't truly over. The trial was over, but the echoes of it lived on long after the courtroom emptied. News vans eventually left Maplewood, cameras stopped flashing, and the world moved on to the next headline. But inside me, something stayed broken, a quiet unease that refused to fade. For the first time in months, our house felt peaceful. Lily's laughter returned, soft but real, and she even started painting again, bright flowers and sunshine, as if she was painting the world she wanted to believe in. I tried to do the same. I planted roses by the porch, cleaned the old wheelchair ramp, and tried to reclaim the normal life that Karen and Wexler had stolen from us. But normal never truly came back. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I heard footsteps outside. Other times, I'd find old HOA letters in the mailbox, unsigned, faded, but always reminding me of the past. Maintain standards, they read. Maplewood deserves perfection. I told myself it was paranoia, but deep down I knew better. One cold evening in early December, I got a call from Officer Daniels. His voice was heavy, like he'd been carrying bad news for days. "Mrs. Miller," he said quietly, "I thought you should know. Wexler's transfer bus was ambushed last night." My blood ran cold. "Ambushed? You mean he's dead," Daniel said. "Shot during an attempted escape. Or, at least, that's what the report says." I sat in silence, gripping the phone. Dead. The man who had terrorized our lives, the one who had smiled as my daughter cried in court, was gone. But there was no relief in hearing it, only dread. Something in Danielle's tone told me there was more. "You don't believe it was an escape, do you?" I asked. He sighed. "Let's just say the details don't add up. Security footage is missing, and one of the officers assigned to his transport has vanished. Someone wanted him silenced permanently." I pressed a hand to my chest. Who would want to protect him now? "That's the thing," Daniel said. "We found a burner phone in his cell before the transfer. Last text sent said, 'The project continues.' The project. Operation Clean Street. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The wind howled through the trees, and every creak of the house made me jump. Around midnight, I checked the front camera, nothing. Then I checked the side view, the one facing Karen's old property. The house was dark, abandoned for months. Yet a faint light flickered in one of the upstairs windows. My heart pounded. I grabbed a flashlight, slipped on my coat, and stepped outside. The cold air bit through my skin. As I crossed the street, the silence was suffocating. No crickets, no cars, no sound except my own breathing. The front door of Karen's old house creaked open easily, like it had been waiting. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and mildew. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, empty walls, broken furniture, and on the table near the kitchen, a single envelope. It was addressed to me. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a printed note. "You can't uproot rot by cutting one branch. It grows underground." I felt my stomach twist, and below that message, there was a symbol, a circle with 3 lines through it. It looked like a logo. I took a photo of it and sent it to Daniels immediately. A minute later, he called back, his voice urgent. "Where are you?" "Karen's old house. Get out. Now." "Why?" "Because that symbol, it's the mark of the Clean Estates Coalition. Wexler wasn't working alone. There are others, HOA networks across multiple states, doing the same thing. You need to leave." But before I could move, I heard it, the soft creak of floorboards upstairs. I froze. Then a voice came from the darkness, calm and unfamiliar. "You shouldn't have come here, Mrs. Miller." My flashlight flicked upward. A shadow at the top of the stairs. A man, tall, wearing a gray suit and black gloves. "Who are you?" I demanded, stepping back. He smiled faintly. "A replacement." I turned and ran. He followed, footsteps heavy but measured. I burst through the front door, just as headlights flooded the driveway, Daniel's car screeching to a stop. He jumped out, gun drawn. "Police! Freeze!" The man stopped, hands raised. His face stayed calm, eerily calm, as if he'd expected this all along. Daniels cuffed him, reading his rights, but before putting him in the car, he asked, "Who sent you?" The man just smirked. "You can arrest me, officer. But the neighborhood always replaces its leaders. That's the rule." Later, back at the station, Daniels told me what they found on the man's phone: maps, addresses, files labeled candidate properties. Ours was one of them. Apparently, Wexler's Clean Estates wasn't just a Maplewood project, it was a national operation. Dozens of communities, all run under different HOA names, enforcing the same brutal standards to drive out anyone they deemed unfit. The FBI got involved. Warrants were issued across 3 states. But as the investigation grew, so did the danger. That night, Daniels called again. His tone was different this time, protective, almost fatherly. "You need to move, Mrs. Miller. Go somewhere quiet for a while, somewhere they can't find you." I looked around my house, at Lily's paintings on the wall, her wheelchair by the door, the roses blooming by the porch. Leaving felt like surrender, like letting them win. "I can't," I said. "This is our home. She deserves to grow up where she fought to live." Daniels paused. Then softly he said, "Then you'd better be ready for whatever comes next." Weeks passed. The investigation made headlines again. Arrests followed. Hidden HOA accounts were exposed, entire boards resigned, and families like mine came forward with their stories of bullying, discrimination, and threats disguised as community rules. Maplewood became a symbol of resistance. But even as the world praised the victory, I stayed cautious. I changed our locks, upgraded the cameras, and kept a bat by the door. One night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at me and said, "Mommy, do you think bad people know when they're bad?" Her question stopped me cold. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said softly. "Maybe some of them do, but they pretend they're doing good things, even when they're hurting others." She thought for a moment, then whispered, "Then I'll be good for the ones who aren't." I kissed her forehead, trying to hide the tears in my eyes. Spring came. The sun felt warm again, the roses grew taller, and for the first time in a long while, peace didn't feel like a lie. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch, Lily playing with her dog in the yard, a delivery truck stopped by. The driver handed me a small brown package. No label, no return address. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a small wooden sign. It read, "Welcome to Maplewood, a community of excellence." And underneath, written in black ink, "Coming soon, new HOA elections." My hands went cold. Somehow, the system was trying to rebuild itself. I looked across the street. Karen's house was still empty, windows boarded, but in the reflection of the glass, I thought I saw movement. A flicker, a shadow. Maybe it was just the light. Maybe not. Either way, I whispered into the quiet evening, "Not this time," because they could rebuild their rules, their boards, their perfect little neighborhoods, but not their power. Not anymore. This time, the whole world was watching. And this time I was ready. If you've ever had a neighbor cross the line, someone who thought power made them untouchable, tell me your story in the comments. Because silence only helps the guilty. And don't forget to subscribe for more real, shocking stories like this one.